Another Monday Night Football slate upon us, and this one looks like it should be an ugly one with Bengals versus Jaguars. The Jags, a 10-point favorite at home in this one, so you have to find some really unique ways to build some lineups that are going to be helpful tonight. Of course, we're always going to build 3 different ways on this stream. We're going to hand build the lineup, first of all, using the advanced analytics that I swear by from a site like Sports Info Solutions, of course, Pro Football Reference as well, some other ones mixed in. Secondly, we're going to look at the projections and ownership projections from Stochastic, then run an optimizer out, Fantasy Cruncher, to see what the math's going to drive people to as a plays that they'll get to over and over again without even realizing it. Last but not least, we'll build some sims on Stochastic as well to find the 10,000 lines that we'd like to play tonight, have them compete against each other 40,000 times. And at the end of the video, I'll give you guys 3 takeaways to build unique lineups for this Monday Night Football slate. Let's get into it here. And sorry for starting a little bit late on this one. I am exhausted. It has been a long weekend. Of course, week 13, the Zach Moss week, was frankly just kind of tedious. There's a lot of work to end up with the exact same shares of the field as Zach Moss. Of course, if you didn't play yesterday's main slate, you don't know what I'm talking about, I guess. And well, I don't know why you wouldn't. So much fun out there in the streets. But the Sunday Night Football slate was a good one for me to help me make back whatever went on with Zach Moss shenanigans. So feeling good about that here. Hope you guys had a great weekend as well. Let's get into this one. So obviously we're talking about a 10-point favorite for Jacksonville. What are the ways that we try to attack a 10-point favorite? Could be onslaughts, could certainly be targeting a pass catcher at captain in the hopes to get different there. And I do think that is the one thing I'm going to do. There has been a guy who has been, I would say, something of a bane of existence this year, playing him at tight end, playing some of the sims especially, where week after week, Evan Ingram comes up as a play that looks better than to the sims, and he actually ends up being in real life. It has been a situation for him where he's getting a good amount of targets on the year. I believe over 7 targets. Yes, 7.5 targets for him per game on the year. Air yards per target, not the highest, 4.7 air yards per target. But it is a spot for Evan Ingram where the run bad on touchdowns is impossible to believe. He's not getting a lot of red zone targets on the year, just 0.4 per game compared to 1.2 for Calvin Ridley, 1.6 per game for Zay Jones, the limited run of games that he's had, 0.5 per game for Christian Kirk. Point being, everybody gets targeted more in the red zone than Evan Ingram does. But they have been trying to force the ball a little bit more, have been trying to get the ball in Evan Ingram. And it was just an egregious throw the last time the Jags played. Trevor Lawrence airmailed the ball, going to Evan Ingram in the end zone that I think he is due. So Evan Ingram is actually going to be the play that I keep for at captain today. Don't love him overall as a player. Again, you can see the box scores in recent weeks as well, where you're not seeing that slate-breaking upside. But for a tight end, 8 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets. The crush of targets is there. The air yards, as we talked about, are not there. It is certainly more of a Calvin Ridley spot in that one. But Jacksonville facing a Cincinnati defense, and on the year, 0.71 EPA allowed to tight ends, I believe second worst in the league behind the Cowboys. 11% target rate going to tight ends, also a little bit above average. You could definitely make the case to go to a Calvin Ridley, to go to a Zay Jones, to go to a Christian Kirk, but I think people won't be on Evan Ingram because we just not seen a ceiling for him in a meaningful way. He's not crested past 20 fantasy points on the year. We do need to see him do that tonight. I think this could be the night for him. So let's go with Evan Ingram here, and he will be our captain officially. Shout out to the chat as well. Good morning, Spags. The fellow Squirter's been waiting all morning for this to say. The Christian Watson bags are going up. Yes, hopefully his hamstring is healthy after he came up limp on that one, but was walking around the sidelines, looked happy after the game as well, walking around. So hopefully that is a good sign for him. Plays the Giants on Monday Night Football next week. So Christian Watson seemingly hitting the strides at the right time. Shout out Obi-Wan. Saw him in the Stochastic stream this weekend. Appreciate him being here. And Justin as well, one of our regulars. Appreciate all of you guys showing up here. Of course, if you're not always here on Splash Play, make sure to subscribe down below. Hit the join button as well for $4.99 a month to help me put on the show every day here. All the great info we put out there. I don't come by it easily. So please do subscribe and join down below. Other plays we can get to here. Trevor Lawrence been rushing a little bit more recently, up to 4.6 rushes per game, 0.9 of which are inside the red zone. Trevor Lawrence, I've been willing to not play QBs with a pass catcher at captain lately. Yesterday, part of the reason I had some lineups that bubbled up was I didn't go to Patrick Mahomes. That allowed me to get different, allowed me to get some different looks in, along with including Christian Watson at captain, of course, as well as Pacheco at captain on those builds. I think that in this game, though, Trevor Lawrence to me seems like a player that we should be getting to. We've seen him start to surge most recently, 28.6 last game, 32.2 the game before that. This matchup against Jacksonville, or against Cincinnati rather, is not quite as good. A flat 0 EPA per dropback allowed, of course, the expected points added metric that I always cite on here is a reflection of how close the defense is to giving up positive production, giving up negative production. On the year, the Bengals defense being a flat 0 in terms of EPA per dropback is a higher end one, even though 0 would indicate average. It actually is towards the upper echelon of the league. Obviously not as hospitable as some other matchups, but still a good matchup. Cincinnati also giving up 0.01 EPA per rush. So you can make the case here to go to Travis Etienne, go to Trevor Lawrence. Really don't trust the Bengals studs very much with Jake Browning throwing on the ball. Jake Browning on the year, just a 66% catchable ball rate is not the best. Negative 0.22 EPA per pass for him, one of the worst marks in the league as well. Not quite Tommy DeVito territory, but pretty much as bad as all of them. I'm going to put Trevor Lawrence in here. I'm also going to put ATN in here, and I think this is going to be a pretty chalky start. But Ingram at captain, I hope will decrease the ownership product. And I'm hoping also that moving away from wide receiver will decrease the ownership product a little bit here, because I'm not in love with the wide receivers. I think the matchup is okay for them. Nothing really stands out as that meaningful. 0.14 EPA per target allowed out wide, 0.11 EPA allowed to the slot. Ridley can certainly get there. Has been looking better more recently since Zay Jones came back in the mix. Zay Jones being in there does take away some targets, but does change the route tree of a guy like Calvin Ridley, who frankly just can't get open himself anymore, has to be schemed open a little bit more directly. So these guys are perfectly fine plays, but for this build, I'm going to try to go this way and see what we can do to get different. Browning under pressure. Browning so far, a 46% pressure rate on dropbacks, one of the worst marks in the league on the year. The Jaguars D is not great. They do blitz at a 29% rate, but just get pressure at 23%. QB hurries at 9%, so a little bit better there. It does feel like they should be in his face enough that I think a Jaguars D would be a good pick here. Jaguars D actually kind of reasonable at 4,800 as well. So let's put in Jaguars D. God, what is even the Bengal you want to play? Like, I really think it's possible the Bengals the Bengals D makes a winning lineup just because nobody can get past 10 points in this game. I'm not going to play it that way. What is the spot to attack here for the Bengals? Like Mixon getting some checkdowns. The Jacksonville D does allow a 21% target rate to running backs, which is on the higher end of things. That could be it. Mixon could be our play. Jamar Chase, we know, is going to get some amount of targets out wide, which could be less efficient overall. Only Bengal kicker, maybe. I guess the hope then would be that they could actually get, they have to get to basically the 35-yard line enough times. Can they even do that? I'm actually not that confident they can. Man, this is really tough. I think I'd like to target a one-off touchdown play to somebody. T. Higgins does not have great touchdown props. I think had a 77% chance of under 0.5 touchdowns according to the betting markets that we track it probably. We used to as of Saturday. Man. I think we got to target a pass catcher. I think it's Mixon or Chase. Chase is 9,400. That's pretty cheap for Chase. Browning himself can run a little bit and maybe have a little bit more of a floor. See if Chase gets what did Chase get last game with Browning? I'm going to belabor this hand build a little bit more just because I think there are legitimate questions asked about all these guys. 6 targets for 81 yards, 7 targets for 12 yards a game before that. God, I think Jamar Chase is the play. Higgins coming off the hamstring thing, a little bit more live as a game theory play as well. But let's go Jamar Chase and try to build a Jaguars 5-1 here. What can we get for the 5th part of the Jaguars? This might be chalky. This might not be chalky. We will find out in a little bit here. Dearness Johnson getting some work lately. Yeah, it's 7 attempts rushing last game, 2 targets. It's almost 10 touches in that last game against Houston, and that was a competitive game. Drew Sample time, maybe. Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson, I'd probably prefer Tanner Hudson based on what I'm seeing projection-wise. Stochastic is a 5.1 projection for Tanner Hudson, a 1.8 for Drew Sample. God. Is Irv Smith in the mix here? Irv Smith is still playing too. Just not getting as much work with Hudson lately. Man, oh man. All right, last pick in here. You know what? This is going to make it not... No, or is the Bengals D able to do anything? I'd rather go Dearness Johnson. I was thinking about going Bengals D here because you do pair an onslaught with the opposing defense. Sometimes it allows you to get pretty unique. Dearness Johnson at 4,200, I agree. Hard price to get to. With that much money that I have left over, I think it's possible for him to be in the mix as a play. You could also go to a Chase Brown, perhaps. He should get a little bit more work down the home stretch, you would think, just because the Bengals season is going nowhere. And what does playing Joe Mixon at this point do for you? Josephus maybe can get a play going. There's a lot of shitty Bengals I think you can go to, but to get to a 5-1, it's we would have to play Bretton Strange, who is not the highest probability play at this point, getting less work more recently. Snoop Connor's not in the mix. There's really nobody else on the Jag side to play here down this low. Bigsby would be an alternative to Dearness Johnson. It does seem like Dearness Johnson's a little bit more secure. We saw Tank Bigsby get 1 touch last week compared to, again, almost 10 for Dearness Johnson. Luke Farrell is in the mix as well, but I don't need to play 2 tight ends. I think this is it. Final team: Evan Ingram, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Jaguars D, Jamar Chase, Dearness Johnson. I think you could also drop Chase down to Higgins. You could drop Chase down to Mixon. That would also be a build that works for me. But I think this is kind of the core that I want to get to tonight. Ingram at captain, Lawrence and Etienne, we're saying provide the floor here. The guys that should be the safest as a 10-point favorite. This will be the hand build we go with here in the huddle single entry. And let's keep it moving here. Projections, looking them up next. Time to get that bag. I'll be here watching for real, for real. Nobody watches the replays more than me. I appreciate that. Just keep playing it on a loop over and over again in your house, like rappers playing Scarface back in the MTV Cribs days. Top projected players. Trevor Lawrence, just shy of 19, so he'll be coming up in a lot of lineups, you have to assume. Highest, most expensive player, highest projected player as well. Travis Etienne, 16.7, a little bit lower at a 10-2 salary. I would think that we might get, still probably to get a lot of Lawrence and Etienne because there's a pretty big gap between Etienne and Calvin Ridley in these stochastic projections. Ridley, number 3 at a 14.7 projection, $9,200 salary. Evan Ingram, Ingram might come up a little bit more than I would have hoped. Because he is cheaper, because he's like a lot cheaper than Calvin Ridley. Projection is not that far off from Ridley, and even not that far off really from Etienne. I think Ingram might pop up a little bit more in the optimizer than it might seem. Christian Kirk kind of looks like the tournament play here. Awkward price tag for him at 8,200, 12.95 projection for him. I think that makes sense as a play that actually might be the most high leverage play out of all of them. Though Zay Jones, if you really want to get thin here, Zay Jones at a 7.4 projection, awkward salary. I think he's the player that probably gets targeted the least here by players tonight in the showdown. Zay Jones, last game out, played 54 snaps, so playing a lot of snaps, just not getting targeted. Calvin Ridley, for comparison, played 71 snaps. Evan Ingram played 53, and Christian Kirk played 58. So Zay Jones is right in the mix there. Has not had the upside yet, but I think Zay Jones for tournament's going to be the most live play because this projection sucks. The salary doesn't work with the projection. He might not come up at all in an optimizer, but we'll find out in a moment. Top value plays according to the projections right now. Brenton Strange, a $200 guy you can maybe get to. Not the highest projection. Travion Williams, a 1.6 projection, $400 salary. Does play the third and longs, but with Chase Brown back in the mix, I do hope/believe that we will see Travion Williams be less involved. Tim Jones, I thought was still an IR, but he's getting a projection right now at a $200 salary. Not the most exciting values to go to here. Irv Smith is probably the one you'd have the most confidence in. And Evan Ingram is a top 5 value. So it does feel like Evan Ingram will be a little bit chalkier than I hoped for with the handle that I was doing. The hope is the Ingram ends up in more people's flex and not much captain for your lineup. I agree. I think that would be the hope. Still think it's going to happen a little bit when we run the optimizer. We'll find out in a moment here. Other top owned plays on the slate. So Trevor Lawrence projected for 64% ownership overall, 12% at captain. Travis Etienne projected for 58% ownership at all, 13.7 of which is going to be a captain. So it doesn't seem like right now Travis Etienne expect to be the chalk captain, which makes sense. Running back in a game dominant script for the Jaguars at home. I think it's a build that people will go to a lot. And actually, I would guess based on how people build, maybe the Q tag on Etienne right now drives him down a little bit, but I think Etienne could be 18 to 20% owned would be my guess, just because that is a game script that people like to go to a lot. 10-point favorite. You assume the running back is salting it away. But in reality, we could see the Bengals press a little bit more. Could see the Bengals get some stops on defense. I would certainly try to play an outcome that is not the slog it out Travis Etienne captain game personally. Calvin Ridley, number 3 at 48% ownership at overall, 10% at captain. Evan Ingram, 46% ownership overall, 10% at captain. Christian Kirk, 44% ownership overall, 9% at captain. So projecting me pretty flat between the top 10 guys. So maybe Kirk not as big of an advantage as I thought. Zay Jones, though, not involved at all down here. I think Zay Jones is a really sneaky captain to go to tonight. If he's going to be 20% owned, 2.4% at captain, playing him at flex will decrease your ownership product, but playing him at captain, I think is a pretty exciting play to have for a guy that just hasn't had a single upside game this year because of the injuries, because of the fact that Calvin Ridley is there. But if you do see things pull away from Calvin Ridley a little bit, this is a monster spot for Zay Jones. So I think that's really intriguing. Guys under 10%, Dearness Johnson at 12, so I think that does work for the lineup we built. Bengals D, not going to be too highly owned at 18%. I would guess it's probably a little bit lower in this kind of build based on what we saw Packers last time at 10%. Obviously, the Jags offense, rather, is not the Chiefs offense, so I wouldn't expect that to be 1-to-1. But I would guess that the Bengals D just doesn't get played very much because of the fact that people think it's going to be a blowout for the Jaguars, but Bengals D just needs one takeaway. And I also think you could build 5-1s where Bengals D is the one Bengal you have coming back because Bengals D at least has a floor, where some of these other players don't have a tangible floor because Jake Browning is not a good QB. Other low-owned guys to point out, Irv Smith, Drew Sample, Trenton Irwin, Luke Farrell. Irwin goes down quite a bit, though. T. Higgins back in, so that's not the sexiest play. Travion Williams, Tank Bigsby. None of these guys meaningfully involved. Chase Brown probably won't even have a projection on him, so I'll play some Chase Brown tonight. I would assume if he does get a projection from either ETR or Stochastic, but Chase Brown feels like a thin play, and he's going to be a thin play until 1 week he's not, which kind of sucks for Chase Brown. I expect there to be a point where Joe Mixon, they just decide, hey, let's not give Mixon 20 touches because it's not useful for him or for us at this point. When that happens, I think Chase Brown takes a little bit of a move upwards, but for right now, we're not there. Let's get the projections. Let's upload them in here to Fantasy Cruncher, and let's see what the Cruncher gives us. Of course, what the optimizer is going to tell us is not directly what the field's going to play. What it's going to tell us is what the math pushes people towards. Of course, using stochastic projections, which are pretty much industry standard in terms of being used for a lot of different people, but also being used in other parts of configurations of projections. Also, like people who average them out like I do. I combine stochastic projections with ETRs. That's how that goes for a lot of players out there in the field. It does seem Joe Mixon is the one making it in everywhere. Mixon gets an 84% of lineups, so not in all 100% of lineups. He's not a guy you could fade right away to get unique. Evan Ingram, though, fuck, man. It really feels like sometimes I do this stream and it's like, oh, I'm building something really unique here. Like, this is going to be contrarian. And then we go to the optimizer and it's like, nope, never mind. Evan Ingram is, in fact, in every lineup, 64% at flex. 36% in captain, so he comes in every one. Trevor Lawrence, 76% at flex, 24% at captain. He is also in every one. Jaguars D, 64%. This is so much for a defense. That makes the Jags not a great play today, I would think. 64% at flex, and then 12% at captain. So you're getting Jaguars D in 76% of these 25 unencumbered crunches here. So it's pretty brutal to see. But the only ones who are in every lineup do seem like Ingram, Lawrence, ATN not making it in every lineup as well. ATN kind of seems a little bit under-owned for the role. So right away, what we're going to talk about when we get to the 3 takeaways to build unique lineups. Fading one of Trevor Lawrence or Evan Ingram seems like that'll be the play for today based upon the projections here, but not very good. Don't know about Ingram's ceiling. Looks like only 4 red zone targets a season. That's correct. That'd be something you could nickel and dime more on the main slate. I would try really hard not to care about that in a showdown. You can care about it a little bit more given that he's coming up everywhere, but we just haven't seen an Ingram ceiling game. I think that's more important for a showdown that hasn't occurred. People are just going to flock to that a little bit less. Projection-wise, he comes up everywhere, and I think like Spurious News, or I think it was Spurious News, might have been historical. Yeah, no, it was Spurious News saying, just because of the fact that Ingram's popping up everywhere, he's going to get more in the flex. I think people are going to have a harder time playing him at captain. So I think Ingram's more appealing as a captain play, but he also works as a flex play. He's just going to work too well for everybody out there. Kickers. We are getting a good amount of Brandon McManus, less of Evan McPherson. Neither of those coming up everywhere, so I think both are perfectly fine plays to play as normal. DST-wise, Jaguars, 64%. Again, that's a lot of Jags D, man. Like, that is an incredible amount of Jaguars D relative to what we're normally getting on a slate. Obviously, they're priced pretty reasonably. Jake Browning getting pressured on 46% of dropbacks. It's going to lead to sacks. Jags D has a good floor and a good ceiling. Like, it's got them both. I just think that's a lot of a defense on a slate, especially a defense that's not like 3K in this kind of matchup. So just be mindful of that one. Team stacks. 5-1s or fuck. I just want to redo the lineup, man. This is tough. 19 out of 25 are 5-1s favoring the Jags. So I think it's really thin to get to a 5-1 favoring the Bengals just because of this game script, because of the talent involved, especially at QB, and also the motivation for Cincinnati. Like, I assume they're still playing for the playoffs. Why though? Like, they're not gonna have a shot to make it. Like, they just couldn't do anything against Pittsburgh. They're not doing anything against good teams. That said, like, Bengals are really underrepresented here. You're not even getting 4 Bengals. You're not even getting 3 Bengals. So if you really want to try to go for like a unique build, obviously the 5-1 Bengals onslaughts could be really unique, but a 3-3 Bengals will still be a little bit more unique than it should be. A 4-2 Bengals will still be a little bit more unique than it should be. It's just too easy here to come up. Man, this is a lot of 5-1s. 19 out of 25 onslaughts means that there is a very obvious way that everybody's going to be building tonight. That is heavy Jaguars with Jags D, with Trevor Lawrence, with Evan Ingram. So fucking same team that I built here. Basically will be a very popular one tonight. I think we got lower by taking Dearness Johnson and this configuration with Ingram at captain, but this is really like, this is a lot, man. You do not see 5-1s come up this naturally this often, but that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, Matt saying, looks like we're building heavy Cincinnati builds. Matt knows he's been doing well in showdowns recently, so he's always building the contrarian ways. And I would say, for me, like if I'm putting 20 entries in the Millie Maker with, or I guess the 500K up top one, the big tournament today on DraftKings, I would say you're trying to build like at least 5 lineups that are a little bit heavier Bengals, whether it be that 5-1 or it be that 4-2 Bengals. But this is like, if you just got to build contrarian here, because everybody's going to try to find thin needles to thread of 5-1 Jaguars builds. I'll still build one, but if you're building 5-1 Jaguars, like leave a lot of money on the table, do something unique, because this is just all 5-1s. This is an onslaught. Chop slate. If a 5-1 Jaguars hits and there's not a lot of salary left on the table, it's probably like a 200-way chop slate would be my guess. Yeah. Let's run the Sims though and see what we get here. I thought that we were going to have generated lineups. Oh, we did. Okay, good. Let's simulate these lineups here. Of course, what they do on Stochastic is have the 10,000 lineups compete against each other 40,000 times each. Let me make sure the prize pool is correct because they've been moving it every week, and I want to make sure we have the right number. So it is, in fact, yes, 33% going to first place today. So we will run 30% to first. Let's run the sim, and let's see what we get. This slate, man, this is going to be everybody playing Jaguars. So the hero play is just to play Bengals. That is how it goes every single time out. A best example for me would be last year. There was a 5-1 Patriots onslaught week against the Bears. I had a lineup that was top. I was actually number one, solo number one too, for a 5-1 Bears build in that game. That was number one for like the first 3 quarters of the game, or basically the first 3 quarters of the game. Got away from me at the end there, and I think it ended up being a different version of a 5-1 Bears build. The point being, like, just when people don't play the 5-1 for the alternate team, obviously the Sims people are a little bit sharper about the stuff. But that's why it is. Like, it's not about playing the good plays. It's not even about playing the Vegas total plays in a showdown. It's about playing what's going to be unique. That's an actual shot to win. So if you are playing for the Bengals to at least put up fantasy points, if not actually outright win the game, it's going to help you get unique right away. So that's something I would try to build towards a little bit, at least in some portion of lineups. But let's look at our highest ROI lineups. Top ROI lineup here, which will always be duped at a 50K salary for the most part. Trevor Lawrence, Brandon McManus, Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, Evan McPherson, Jake Browning. So you are getting 2 Bengals in this one. You are getting McPherson and Browning as your plays. So trying to consolidate the production to the QB and the kicker because they're not expected to score touchdowns here. It's obviously a logical approach to go to for the number 1 overall build. Number 2 would be a little bit more appealing at a 49.2 salary. Calvin Ridley, Bengals D, Brandon McManus, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence. So this is a 5-1 build with nobody besides Jaguars and the Bengals D. So the Bengals D is the one bring back here. If you play Bengals D as a 1 and a 5-1, like I mentioned earlier, that basically is saying that you're not expecting any other player on the Bengals to get over 10 fantasy points, which is certainly possible in this matchup. Obviously, I think you're going to do better trying to expect the Bengals to be able to move the ball, if not actually getting touchdowns. But I think these are the builds that are going to come up as high ROI pretty easily. Let's favor the top 100 and see what the overall gives us. Our highest exposed player would be Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram in the flex coming up everywhere. 55% exposure. Pool's expected to be at 43%. So the leverage is 12% for you here. Jaguars D also coming up 45% of the time of the flex. So even though they are a very obvious projection play, they're coming up quite a bit, 45% of the time. Calvin Ridley, 43% in flex. Christian Kirk, a lower 43% in flex. And then Jake Browning, 40% in flex, coming up a lot. Highest owned captains. Trevor Lawrence at captain, 37% ownership there. 21% for Ridley at captain, 15% for Ingram at captain. So he is the highest ROI captain, 20% ROI. So at least that looks good for our hand build. But you are getting 7% more than the field of him expected. So that's Evan Ingram for you. We are getting less, or no, we're getting a little bit less than Travis Etienne, 13% exposure compared to 16.5% in the pool. So Etienne, I think, will be the very chalky captain. I would say for this slate, I think Etienne and captain is like Etienne, Jags D, Trevor Lawrence, Ingram, I think is the base of like a chalky build that's going to be duped a lot. So for me and how I like to play, I think you could wipe that out entirely and just try not to play those. But obviously you have 2 spots to try to get unique there. So if you are going to play a base of Etienne and captain, Ingram, Jaguars D, Trevor Lawrence, you better leave some salary on the table. You better do something that's really unique there. Like make it a $45,000 salary team. But you got to do something unique because that's going to be, I think it's going to be duped a lot. Besides that, nothing else stands out too much. Look at some interesting captains. If you have any captains you want me to look at here, please drop them in the chat. What's Jamar Chase's ownership at captain? Let's see that, because we do know Jamar Chase obviously going to be in a tough spot, but Jamar Chase at 8% captain ownership, I think that might be a better play than it would be normally. Jamar. Ja. All right. Oh, this one. Okay, 47.9. So not high ROIs on these lineups, but you are still getting ones that win at a 0.06% rate, which, for 40,000 times is enough of a win rate to be worth something. Jamar Chase, Christian Kirk, Evan McPherson, Jaguars, Mixon, Trevor Lawrence. So you're basically saying that this is a 3-3 build, a tight game here. The Bengals keep competitive enough on the strength of Jamar Chase moving the ball downfield. Maybe Mixon punches in a touchdown or just gets PPR points, but and that's a good build. This one at 47.9 to be a little bit more appealing. Chase, McManus, Ingram, Jaguars, Mixon, Trevor Lawrence. Again, same thing here. We are getting at least 2 Jags in, and Jamar Chase at captain is the thing that's making us unique. Yeah, I think this build's probably about as good as it's going to get. 47.9. Yeah, I like this one the most out of the Jamar Chase captains right away. Let's look at T. Higgins as well. Like the thesis for T. Higgins remains the same, other than the fact that T. Higgins is now probably very afraid of injuring himself in a contract year. So Jamar Chase, full go. T. Higgins coming off the hamstring. I think you're getting a little bit riskier there. Boy, oh boy. Higgins, Ridley, Kirk, Browning, Mixon, Zay. So we're getting away from ATN, who doesn't pop up naturally projection-wise, but we do think will be a casual play that's get pumped in a lot in terms of people forcing him in. We do get away from Trevor Lawrence. We do get away from Flex Evan Ingram. So this lineup normally wouldn't be one I would play, but because we're getting away from Jags D, Ingram, and Trevor Lawrence, I think we're unique enough here with this this Higgins captain rather at 49.8 to get there. So that's what it's about, really. If you have things that feel chalk, if you have things that feel too easy and like plays people actually want to play, drop your salary down because you're probably getting duped a lot. If you're playing a thing that's ugly that people won't want to play, you then play a little bit of a higher salary lineup. I still wouldn't play a 50K salary for the most part, but for 49.8, like this actually would be a playable T. Higgins lineup, I think. I don't think this one's plausible, really, but just for the sake of argument, what does a Jake Browning captain look like? So Jake Browning, I'm not playing him a captain with no pass catchers. This one would be a no-go. I'd probably want, honestly, at least 1 pass catcher, probably at least 2 would be my guess if you're going to play Jake Browning a captain. So this one at 49K would look better. Browning, Brandon McManus, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon. You're getting direct leverage on the Jaguars scoring touchdowns with ATN by going to McManus here. You're also getting Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram without Trevor Lawrence. That makes you more unique. I would say Chase and Higgins would be a little bit more appealing here, but Chase and Mixon works pretty fine for a Browning captain. Showdown aside, I'm just bummed at the Burrow injury. It's taking away what could have been a marquee Monday night game. Yes, it would have been a lot more fun for sure. That said, for the showdown parts of it, it does make it a little bit more unique and certainly priced in a way to make it so you can build more interesting lineups. So that's the trade-off here. But yeah, frankly, it's all relative for people. I'm sure if you had a lot of Joe Burrow in best ball, you're also double pissed about that. For me, I didn't have a lot of Joe Burrow, so I was finally due 1 QB that actually wasn't over the field on getting hurt for the year. I have a lineup, by the way, I was looking at that's doing still really well, and I believe in Best Ball Mania. That was a Deshaun Watson, AR, and I think Daniel Jones were my 3 QBs, and it's still hanging in and cashing or like advancing right now, and I'm like, fucking A. Like doing it with 0 QBs is just what this year is. But that's life. That's how it's going here. Jake Browning is our QB, and we all have to get used to it. Other unique captains. Look at Zay Jones. I think Zay Jones is going to be a little bit more interesting for us. Zay Jones, so if you're going to play a build that does sort of push toward, where the fuck did it go? If you're going to play a build that pushes towards something that is a likely pro-Jaguars outcome, I would say that Ingram captain, Jones captain are the ones that are going to allow you to get a little bit more unique. As you can see, the ROI is also not crazy high here in this left column, so that does mean that naturally players who are just selecting the top 150 ROI lineups won't land there as easily. This one in 50K, I think, still gets duped. Zay Jones, Ingram, Chase, Jake Browning, Mixon, Trevor Lawrence. You are getting to a 3-3, which is closer to unique. Again, you're not playing Jaguars D, but you are playing Ingram and Lawrence and Zay Jones at captain. Because Zay Jones is at captain, you're not playing Jags D. I think this is close to a usable 50K lineup, but it's not close enough. I think I'd still want to save some salary somewhere. Maybe you go down from Chase to Higgins. I think would be one way to do that. But that's, yeah, I would save some money on this one and not go full 50K. Zay Jones, McManus, Ridley, Mixon, ATN, Lawrence. That one's okay too. Again, 50K. I think it's still getting duped. 49.4, we're getting closer. Zay Jones, McManus, Ingram, Chase, ATN, Trevor Lawrence. So again, no Jaguars D allows us to get unique. We do have Ingram and Lawrence in here, but we are at least getting in one Bengal here. I would think this gets duped, but if I had to guess, it gets duped by less than 10 people would be my hope. All right, we'll look up D. Owens one. If nobody else has any others, then we'll close it out with this. ATN and captain. Again, I don't think ATN and captain is going to be unique in any configuration personally, but we'll take a look. Yeah, you'd have to not play Lawrence, I think, to get unique in this one, but I don't know. I think Lawrence is running enough now that's hard for him to not make a lineup where you do have, success for the Jaguars, but we will see. Let's see. Ingram. I mean, here's a lineup here for D. Owens that right away is going to accomplish what he wanted to. ATN, McManus, Kirk, Ingram, Jamar Chase, Zay Jones. So you are fading Trevor Lawrence here. I think it's a little bit thin to get to 3 Jaguars pass catchers and not expect Trevor Lawrence to make the lineup. Obviously, it can happen. It is a high ROI lineup. You are leaving salary on the table, so it's okay. The game theory of it, though, I think is a little bit weak. Like, that's too many pass catchers in there without the QB being with it. He's going to, Trevor Lawrence would be close to making a lineup here. It would have to be one where you couldn't possibly fit him into this one. I don't know. I don't love the way that looks, to be honest. All right. Anything else? Anything else that I should try to look at? Calvin Ridley. Actually, we haven't looked at full Ingram captains. Look at that really fast. Evan Ingram starts with. All right. My favorite Ingram captain. I mean, these are both usable right away. 48-9, 48-7. Ingram and Ridley, McPherson, Jaguars, ATN, Trevor Lawrence. So you are only playing McPherson here. Man, I think the way you're going to benefit is playing at least one of the pass catchers. This one, 48-7, Ingram, Ridley, Chase, Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, Zay Jones. That is a lot of the notes I'd be looking for. You do fade Travis Etienne, which I think is an important one, potentially on this slate. You are getting pass catchers with Trevor Lawrence. I think that's an important one as well. Feels like maybe with this build, you're getting closer to Trevor Lawrence at captain, but you couldn't afford to get Trevor Lawrence at captain this one. So I think that all checks out for me. I think this would probably be my favorite Everett Ingram lineup to play, at least as of right now, 11:50 on the East Coast. All right, let's do our 3 takeaways here. 3 takeaways to get unique on this build. Number 1 would be fade 1 of Evan Ingram and Trevor Lawrence. That is the one that comes up naturally. I do think both are strong plays tonight. I did highlight Evan Ingram today, which he's been a bane of my existence. I've mentioned him week after week that he's not getting the red zone work. That said, we are seeing a deliberate force of red zone targets him recently. In the spot, it is a plus EPA matchup, one of the best matchups according to the EPA metrics against tight ends going for the Bengals defense. So this is a spot where Evan Ingram, if he's going to hit the ceiling, I think he can do it today. I think Evan Ingram, captain, is worth it for me. It's a way to get unique and still play Evan Ingram with Trevor Lawrence. But right away, if you want to just go for the pure uncut getting unique, it'd be fading 1 of Ingram or Trevor Lawrence or fading them both in some builds. And I do think those are both valid approaches to take tonight. Number 2 would be just not playing Jaguars D. Again, 5-1 onslaughts. That's another thing that we talked about earlier. You could make the case in terms of that being a unique build. Just go into 5-1 Bengals, 4-2 Bengals. That's always going to be the way that this goes. And you have a heavy favorite. That said, it's a pretty low probability outcome for the Bengals to actually be, to win this game outright, to do like the Packers did yesterday at home when the Bengals were on the road. And the Bengals, frankly, is also not as good of a team, not as talented, not congealing the way that Jordan Love, Christian Watson, those guys we have seen come together over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. So for the spot, I do think that playing 5-1s for the Bengals, playing 4-2 for the Bengals is a way to get unique. But the better way to do this is you could still play your Jaguars heavy builds, but just leave out the Jaguars D. Try to assume that the Bengals put up some points. Number 3 would be, I think that's just it. Is you have to find ways in your builds that aren't just the Jaguars just stomping the dicks out of the Bengals. That's how everybody's going to play it tonight. They think Jake Browning sucks. Jake Browning probably does suck, but you're going to perform better. You're going to get better winnings if things go the way of the Bengals actually getting some production going, actually having some upside for themselves. It doesn't mean you have to play Bengals onslaughts, even though I will play some of that. I will play some Bengals 4-1s or 4-2s rather, and 5-1s. But I think that you have to assume Jamar Chase goes off. You have to assume Mixon goes off. You have to assume somebody goes off for the Bengals, because the assumption that the field's going to have is that nobody on the Bengals is going to do shit. And in reality, the Bengals can have an awful game, but you could still see a 20 fantasy point day from Chase. You could still see an 18 fantasy point day from Higgins. You could still see theoretically a 30 point day from one of those guys. I think that's what you're trying to push towards. It's just the Bengals being competent. It's enough to get unique on the slate. So you can go for the hero play of the Bengals win, the Bengals stomp the Jaguars. But in reality, you just have to play the Bengals are a league average team that puts up league average production against the Jaguars. That's going to get you unique enough. So that's my 3 takeaways for the slate. Of course, if you guys enjoyed this video, please do make sure to subscribe down below. Splash Play still on that march to 3K subs, closer than ever now. I think less than 15 people right now we need on this channel. So for the love of God, please subscribe. We're trying to get to that 3K marker so we can move forward and target 4K. And of course, this is a one-man shop here. I show up every day, Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. ish when I'm sleepy, sometimes 11:15 a.m. It's still going to be here for you days throughout the season, of course, throughout the playoffs as well. So please subscribe down below, hit the like button, and get an entry to win some of my BBM or DraftKings Billy Maker winning if best ball goes well. Shouts to the Squirt Squad members. I forgot to add in our 2 that we got on Friday, but check out those guys well. KG and Go Birds. So let's assume that they're on this as well. But the Squirt Squad, you can always see here, joining down below for $4.99 will get your name on this graphic, as well as get custom emojis, VIP perks, the badge, my data sheet on every week, and some more fun stuff coming out this offseason. So please subscribe down below. And if you have the money, join for $4.99 a month. I would appreciate that. And go check out probably good week in the world of betting there for the video that we did this past week. Was plus money over the course of a week of doing the bets. And that's how it goes with probably, where we track the top performing sportsbooks around the world, find the true probability of every event, then grade that out against local legal sportsbook opportunities. It allows you to take advantageous positions time and time again. And you, as a Splash Play viewer, can save up to 50% a month at probably. So that means basically you could pay $10 a month for our data package for the first month. So check it out, probably.com/subscribe. If you do go over there, use the promo code SPLASH to save yourself 50%. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. And come back tomorrow for the best ball review show, where hopefully things will go well and look good once again. But we will find out tomorrow. Appreciate all you guys being here. Try to get unique on the slate. Again, I gave you guys the weaponry to do so. I hope it works out. But I will be back with you guys tomorrow. So enjoy your days. Thanks for hanging out. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. And if I don't take this down, I do hope you do. I'll see you guys again soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck. Bye.